Welcome to Lesson 5 of Module 4 on Basic Query Formulation with SQL. I'm going to start with a question related to a new clause that you will see in this lesson. This question will be answered in depth in Course 3 of the specialization, in which you will get plenty of practice with extensions to the select statement for business intelligence queries. What are the limitations of the group by clause for business intelligence queries? This lesson covers two new clauses of the select statement. These new clauses provide some rudimentary features for reporting on row summaries rather than just individual rows. This lesson has practical objectives for queries that involve row summaries, not individual rows. You should be able to write and provide narrative explanations about select statements with the group by and having clauses. You should be able to write statements that use both the where and having clauses in addition. Before launching into examples of row summaries, or you might say row groups, I want to motivate the need for row summaries and provide an overview of the select statement features for row summaries. Because tables can contain many rows, it is often useful to see statistics about groups of rows rather than just individual row details. For example, you might want to see the average GPA of students in selected majors. The select statement allows statistical or aggregate functions to be computed and shown for groups of rows. Almost any kind of statistical function can be used to summarize groups of rows. Because this is not a statistics course, we will use only simple aggregate functions such as count, minimum, maximum, average, and sum. The select statement also supports conditions involving statistical or aggregate functions. For example, a common condition for row summaries is to ensure that the number of rows in a group is greater than a threshold, such as 30. Decision-making with small samples can be unreliable. As you will see in examples in the remainder of this lesson, SQL has keywords for aggregate functions, such as AVG for average. The select statement has the group by clause to list grouping columns, and the having clause for conditions on groups of rows. Let's begin with examples that compare select statements with individual rows in the result versus row summaries in the result. Example 1 lists the salary of each faculty member. Sorting by rank allows the result to be easily compared to a similar result with row summaries. Example 2 shows row summaries with each result row showing the rank and average salary of the rank. The first rank in the result, associate professors, summarizes the first two rows in example 1. The average salary of $72,500 is the average of $70,000 and $75,000. You should be able to trace the second and third rows in example 3 to the rows in example 2. It's a style note. Aggregate functions should be renamed. Otherwise, a non-meaningful name may be generated by the SQL compiler. Now, I will execute example 2 without renaming. As you can see, the Oracle SQL compiler generates a reasonable name, but other SQL compilers may not generate reasonable names. Examples 3 and 4 depict the difference between row conditions and group conditions. Row conditions are specified in the where clause. Group conditions are specified in the having clause. Example 3 shows the average GPA for each major. The average GPA is only calculated for juniors and seniors according to the condition in the where clause. Example 4 extends example 3 with a having clause. Example 4 restricts groups to majors with an average GPA greater than 3.1. The having clause must be used for group conditions. A group condition compares an aggregate function result to a value or an expression. Let's execute example 4 to demonstrate an error when a row condition appears in the group by clause. In the script output pane, the Oracle SQL compiler generates an error message that a row condition is not allowed in the having clause. Likewise, when a group condition appears in the where clause, the Oracle SQL compiler generates an error message that the group condition does not belong in the where clause. In the script output pane, you can see the error message generated by the Oracle SQL compiler. To avoid confusion among the various clauses in the select statement, you should understand the evaluation order among the clauses. Row operations in the from and where clauses precede group operations in the group by and having clauses. The final operations of sorting the rows in the order by clause and generating the columns in the result, that's the select clause, occur after row and group operations. SQL compilers follow this evaluation order, although they may perform many optimizations to improve performance. The evaluation order has several lessons. These lessons can be useful on more difficult problems, especially problems that combine joins and grouping that you will see in Module 5. You should remember that row operations precede group operations. If a select statement does not produce desired results, you should usually look at row operations in the from and where clauses first. Grouping only occurs one time. This limitation is only a problem on specialized queries that need to have independent groupings. This limitation can be resolved through other features of the select statement, but these extensions will not be covered in this course. If a select statement does not produce correct results, you should consider using small sample tables to trace the result. Using small tables is tedious, but it can be helpful when initially learning query formulation or when facing a difficult problem. Let's wrap up Lesson 5 about the group by clause. Summarization queries are common in business intelligence due to the usage of summary data for tactical and strategic decision making. This lesson showed examples of the group by and having clauses for row summaries. The group by clause identifies columns to summarize by, and the having clause contains conditions involving aggregate functions like the count function. SQL compilers perform grouping specified in the group by and having clauses after joins and row conditions specified in the from and where clauses. Now let me return to the opening question about the limitations of the group by clause for business intelligence. The group by and having clauses provide rudimentary capability for generating row summaries. These clauses support simple statistical calculations by one or more business factors. Business intelligence requires more subtotals than the group by clause supports, so that results can be shown in varying levels of details. Business intelligence also requires more complex analytical calculations involving ranking, cumulative distributions, and moving groups of rows for statistical calculations such as moving averages. This lesson concludes Module 4. The skills in Module 4 focused on writing relatively simple select statements using single table conditions, join operations, and grouping clauses. You should be prepared to complete the practice and graded problems for Module 4. You can also try extra problems using the order entry database. The class website contains a document explaining the order entry database and the additional practice problems. You need lots of practice to master query formulation, an important skill for working with databases in user and information technology roles. Module 5 will extend your problem-solving skills so that you can gain confidence on more realistic queries.